This is Wings on the Air.
Hi, welcome to Wings on the Air. My name is Ann Edenfield-Sweet. I'm the Executive Director of Wings for Life International. And today we are going to get 10 tips about how to get a job from an expert. A friend of mine, Ramon Torres, who is the Employment Program Manager for Goodwill Industries. So I'm so excited to have you be here with us today. Why don't you share just a little bit, Ramon, about your background so people know that they are hearing from an expert today.
Thank you, Ann. Sure, I've been a hiring manager for well over 35 years, so in that time I've had the opportunity to hire a lot of people, see a lot of interviews or participate in a lot of interviews, certainly see a lot of resumes, and I've seen both what really works, what helps people be successful, and I've also seen a lot of the things that create struggles for a lot of people. And so one of the things that I try and do in my role and what we do in our organization is help people improve their odds of success in getting employed. So that's kind of what I do. My background, again, is in management and supervisory positions, and so I've had that opportunity to coach and mentor and develop people in addition to hiring a lot of people and participating in interviews and hiring events and that sort of recruiting activity.
Yes, I know. I know you've had a lot of experience here. So the first tip here is to prepare. Do your research. So why don't you talk about some of the things that we need to do on that first tip?
Certainly. I think that one of the things that people get most frustrated about is getting all the information together. And if you don't get it all together at the very beginning, what tends to happen is people get frustrated. They have to go back and stop a part of the process, whether it's applying or otherwise. And so my recommendation is to start by getting all the information all together at once. It really shouldn't take someone more than 2 to 3 hours, but there's a lot of info people need. The usual stuff like company names and dates of employment and addresses and such. And some you may not think you need, such as a supervisor's name or address, but those things factor in. Many apps you can't even submit without that info. In addition, you need to get your education and training information. If you have some criminal blemishes, those need to be noted because sometimes employers ask about that stuff. And then in addition to that, you definitely want to line up and have at the ready and understand what your skill sets are, your strengths as it relates to what you're trying to, what kind of role you're trying to get, and then also different accomplishments and recognition. All that's really important to serve, to get that infrastructure of everything that you need just all at once so that it gets you off on the right foot.
Okay, and I know we'll get into some of the details about the things you just mentioned. So point 2 is now you need to prepare your resume, right? So talk to us about that. What do we need to do?
Well, resume is a necessary part of the job search process. And there is no one template that's any better than any other template. And there's a lot of free templates that are online, and we've got some templates available to use. In addition to what we have, you can go to the Workforce Connection, they'll have some templates. But you want to use an existing template. You don't want to try and recreate the wheel. Resumes, on the whole, should be 1 or 2 pages long, with accomplished people going into 2 pages. But they should be really brief. It's a summary, a bullet-pointed summary of your skills and qualifications, transferable skills and qualifications, of your work experience, your education, training, and your volunteer experience. Employers don't take a whole lot of time to look at a resume. So again, it needs to be bullet pointed, it needs to be a summary. And then in addition to that, it needs to highlight your successes and accomplishments for the roles that you've performed in the past. A lot of people just focus on duties, and when you're applying for a particular role, everybody applying for that job is going to have a similar work history, similar skill set. So if all you're doing is putting down your duties, you're not differentiating yourself. So talking about recognition, formal or informal, whether you're talking about some of the awards that you may have had, would all factor into a resume. Ideally, you would want to adjust it for each role that you apply for, but as long as you have a good, solid resume, it should be able to function for most of your job applications. A resume should also serve as a talking point for an interview, so most of your interview talking points should be coming from a resume. So it gives all the employers all the information they need to make a good hiring decision. Part of a resume a lot of people don't think of might be a cover letter. So some roles would would require a cover letter. So if you're applying for a supervisory role or a role in an administrative capacity where communication skills are at a premium, then you would want to use a cover letter as well. But that would be the first real big step once you've accumulated all your information, your data that you would put in for all these applications that you're going to be needing, is to create a resume. Sometimes you may want one for each industry that highlights relevant experience or skills within that particular industry.
Okay, thank you. Now, point 3, you talk about and have listed here about your online social presence. So let's talk about that.
Well, social presence many years ago wasn't a real big deal. But a lot of people are a little probably candid in what they display online. And employers are looking for people who are very professional. And more employers are actually looking at people's online presence to get a feel for the individual as a whole. And will this person professionally represent my organization? So a person should look and edit their Facebook just to make sure that is information that often is available to others. There could be other social media places that you may need to adjust and edit. But there's also some that you can create. So sometimes for some people, they may want to create a LinkedIn profile. You may want to create an Indeed profile, and those can help improve your odds of success in getting employed. So I would encourage people to take advantage of that as well.
Okay. And if we have time, we'll talk about Facebook, because boy, I see things that people post on Facebook, and that's not going to help them get a job. So, but let's continue, because you've got some very important things we need to go over. Number 4, if you've got extra time, what do you recommend people to do if they aren't getting hired right away?
Well, I think everybody looking for a job has extra time on their hands. So this is a great time to kind of build your foundation of what you can do professionally. Because everything that you do, whether it's education or training, can lend itself to improving your opportunities for employment or increasing the number of opportunities that you have for employment. So in addition, it can help you earn more money. So it's a great time to take time out to, we have, for example, at Goodwill, a forklift training course. You can go out and get a commercial driver's license. You can get an IT certification. And while those tend to cost money, there are funding streams available for people who are low income, and if you're out of employment, typically you're low income, and so that you can get funding through a program, for example, called the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. And so sometimes people feel that they're limited in terms of funds because they don't have an income stream coming in, but there are opportunities for people. Just increasing something like there's as basic as computer skills. Computer skills is something that will never go away, and you can always get better at. And the reality is we're only going to use computers more and more and more. So people do have to develop their proficiency with computers. And especially as you get older, you may have worked in a vocational related role, labor related role. But the reality is when you hit my age, 50s, 60s, 70s, you're not going to be able to do those same things. So to be able to function in an administrative capacity, you're going to have great computer skills. So I would definitely look into post-secondary education training, whether it's UNM continuing ed or more formal ed, or other just training programs like a commercial driver's license or even culinary arts.
And of course, we go into all the prisons. And so I encourage everybody, while they're in prison, because they do have education classes, they can learn how to use a computer. And even working a car dealer or something, you're going to put that bill is going to end up on a computer somewhere. You've got to be able to do that. And in order to even apply for a job today, you have to have some basic computer skills. So anybody listening today, please learn computers, teach your children how to use computers, go to Goodwill, go anywhere. I can't stress enough that computer skill, so I'm glad you've mentioned that a lot, because that's so important. Now, point 5, you talk about blocking out time to get a job. So tell us more about that.
Sure. I think in anything someone's done that they've been successful at, they've been able to effectively manage time. And when you manage time, you manage your priorities, you eliminate a lot of the distractions, you're more likely to be successful. And it doesn't matter really what it is. A lot of people, though, struggle with time management. So my recommendation for everybody looking for employment is you need to block out typically about 3 hours each day, Monday through Friday, to be able to look for employment and to apply for employment. It takes quite a lot of time to apply and to filter through the different job opportunities that are available. So being able to manage and those distractions so that you're focused on creating opportunities for yourself, In a high unemployment market, opportunities disappear very, very quickly. So it's really important that people are on top of it each and every day. And because there aren't that many opportunities, a person also needs to be flexible. So that requires a person to look into other opportunities, which takes a little bit more time as well. A lot of the vocational roles you're going to be applying in person, and that's time. So I think to be really successful, a person has to dedicate time to the job search. And when they do that, I think they're going to find they're very successful.
That's great advice. And I always tell people, especially in-person interviewing and dropping off things in person, go back, go back, go back, because that's proving to somebody that you really want the job and they get to know you. A computer ultimately doesn't hire you. A human being hires you. And so they've got to start building those social skills and build up that relationship with the company too. Now, job search engines, what advice do you have regarding that?
Sure, the internet is a great place, and the internet is filled with information. And often though, people get lost in, I call it lost in space. And the reality is there are so many different job search engines that someone can go from one to the next, and it costs a lot of time. And my recommendation is just use one. Oddly enough, the major job search engines all have the same job leads. So to go to multiple ones, you're actually just wasting a lot of your time. So we have certain recommendations that we use. The ones that we encourage people to use are websites where you wouldn't get marketing. Job seekers fall prey to a lot of marketing scams. So they get a lot of junk email and a lot of junk phone calls about educational opportunities and such. And that can be very distracting and frustrating when your inbox explodes every morning with a bunch of junk that you really didn't want. So stick to one major job search engine. You can layer in company websites. I think that's really important. And then also I think that staffing places are also other opportunities for people to find job leads.
Okay, great advice. Do you have any sites that you recommend right now?
Yeah, we love Indeed.com. We find that it's very employer friendly in terms of cost. And you don't have to have your own hiring portal. So Indeed will accept resumes for an employer on their behalf. And so you can, a lot of smaller companies will advertise on Indeed. It's become very, very popular. You don't get a lot of marketing. You can also check Craigslist. There's some there. A lot of the cities around the smaller communities, Facebook jobs are available. They have a posting for different cities there.
Okay, great. Now, point 7 here, spend more time applying for the job instead of looking for the job. So do you want to address that anymore? Sure.
The biggest thing a person has to understand is you'll never get hired unless you're filling out applications. So whenever I work with people, if they're ever frustrated, the first question that we ask as part of our team is, how many applications did you submit last week? And if they're frustrated, the answer is usually the same. It's usually about 1 or 2. So we talked a little bit about time management. It's really important for people to realize that when you block that much time, let's say 3 hours per day for 5 days a week, that you spend most of that time applying. Looking doesn't count. Looking doesn't help you get employed. It takes between as little as 20 minutes to as much as an hour to fill out an employment application. And it takes, oddly enough, about 5 to 10 applications to generate one interview. It takes 3 to 5 interviews approximately to get a job. So you really have to make sure you dedicate the time, pretty much about a half an hour, to finding these leads, and then the rest of the time submitting applications. In an environment where there's a higher unemployment rate, you have to be very, very active. And you have to be flexible. A lot of folks are just looking for that perfect job, and so they're maybe putting in 1 application or maybe 2 applications every 2 weeks. Well, what if there's a lot of very qualified people that submit their applications, resumes for that job? You may not get selected for that job. So you've got to keep, I fish a lot. You have to get the bait into the water if you want to catch a fish, and it's the same thing that goes with getting a job. The more opportunities you create by applying, the more likely it's going to generate an interview and hopefully employment. But you do have to be active, and you do have to be flexible in a higher unemployment market. There aren't as many job leads. And so you have to look at different options that are related to the strengths and your transferable skills that you can successfully perform. And you never know. You may find something that's a little different than what you thought you might want to do that satisfies all your needs from an employer perspective.
Okay, wow. Great advice here. Point number 8, communicate professionally. So I know that is key. So let's talk about that.
Sure. I think the biggest frustration employers have initially with people is the way they communicate in terms of their professionalism. And so when you think of that, people have to understand that every touch point with an employer serves as an evaluation point for the employer. They don't know you, so whether it's a phone call or an email, or maybe they see you at a career fair, maybe you're applying in person, all those touch points, they're looking to gather information that'll help them make a good hiring decision. And so if you give them, if you will, negative information in the sense of the way you answer the phone, the way you dress, even your voicemail, even your email address, those things can actually work against you if you're not aware of the professionalism that employers are expecting. So I would, think very strongly about that, particularly with your voicemail. One of the biggest complaints about employers, you get a lot of folks and a whole generation of folks who primarily text as a form of communication. Employers call you when they want to offer you a position or an interview. And so to not have your voicemail set up would be a mistake. To have your voicemail box full would be another mistake. But it happens all too frequently when people are looking for employment. And then also, cell phone etiquette seems to be a little bit lost in the shuffle. People look at it as a personal device, and it is. But if you're looking for a job, people are going to evaluate even the way you answer the phone. So you're expected to answer professionally. Hi, thank you for calling. This is Ramon. That's a very professional type of greeting. Something that wouldn't be professional is the way you answer with a friend. Hey, dude. There's certain things that don't work for you. And then by the same token, you have to answer when you're ready to talk. A lot of folks, I will contact them, and what's interesting is they'll answer in line at a grocery store. You can hear all this noise, or kids are screaming in the background. You need to be able to answer every aspect of the response needs to be professional. So background noise needs to be limited very limited. And then you need to be able to talk. I've actually had people tell me, to be quite frank, I don't have time to talk to you right now. Can you call me back? And so that would be inappropriate. And it happens all too often. So that professionalism with regard to communication is critical. It's a first impression. It sets the stage for how an employer thinks about you. And if they get a negative first impression, it's very difficult to overcome that negative first impression.
Yeah, I agree. And we work, of course, with so many people coming out of prison. And you don't want to have some kind of really corny email. You want to have a professional email, your name or something. You don't want to have some bizarre thing. And you certainly don't want to have a phone message that has blasting music or all kinds of things. You got to listen for 3 minutes before you can finally leave a message for somebody. I call so many people back, and I'm just amazed. Or people, if we're hiring somebody and they send something to me, and I'm just thinking, first of all, they don't even say their number long enough that I can even return the phone call to them. So that's something that I like to teach too, is say it slowly enough and repeat it twice so I can even call you back. But I'm just amazed at the lack of skills that people have regarding just what you and I think, would consider typical professional behavior, but they don't have it today. And when you're looking for a job, so that voicemail, that email address, how you respond, how you answer that phone call is so important. Great advice. Now, point number 9, preparing for each interview. So let's talk about each interview. So let's talk about that.
Sure. Oddly enough, I've been a hiring manager for quite a long time, and I've asked a lot of hiring managers what % of folks actually prepare for an interview. And oddly enough, it's usually out of 10 people, about 2, maybe 3 people preparing for an interview. And it's very noticeable from an employer's perspective when you work with someone and they have not prepared for the interview. You get pretty much one shot. That interview, they feel you're qualified, they're interested in potentially putting you on board. But if you can't successfully communicate why you're right for the role, then they may not hire you. And I've always said that the best person for the job doesn't always get the job, it's the person who interviews the best. You don't always want a place to go into where they hire you on the spot. Some of those places have lower job morale, higher turnover, fewer benefits. And so you want to be consider for opportunities where they're going to actually interview quite a few people. Those places tend to pay more, they tend to have more benefits, they tend to have higher morale. So you want to expect an interview and feel comfortable with an interview. And so to be able to put yourself in a position for success by preparing, instead of just having a 1 in 10 chance, by preparing, because only 2 or 3 prepare for an interview, your chances are more like 1 in 2 or 1 in 3. And those are pretty good odds. So some of the things that I recommend for people to do to prepare for an interview certainly is to check out the job description, understand what requirements they're looking for and what they expect. I also encourage people to look up the company. I mean, you need to know a little bit about the company. You know, what is Wings? What do you stand for? Is that something I want to represent? In addition to that, you want to look up some interview questions and prepare some answers for those questions. So you get one shot. Preparation is critical.
I totally agree with you there too. And I tell people, do your research. Find out everything you can about that company. We've got a returning citizen who knew the company he wanted to work for, and boy, he competed against a guy that had worked for that same job for 11 years. He had done this research. He had a manual this thick of stuff he had printed off about that company and all the research. And he got the job over somebody. He was freshly out of prison, had come into our office, and we were trying to help him, and got the job over somebody who had had the job for 11 years because he knew so much and impressed that hiring manager so much. So
and I think
that's so important.
What people really forget is when you prepare for an interview, it gives you a little more confidence because you've practiced, and you come across as more confident rather than insecure. And there will be a lot of formal interviews with big companies you'll have the opportunity to prepare for, but you'll also have some companies that will call you and expect you to, if you will, interview on the spot. So you have to have your talking points ready, and your resume should serve as a great talking point for tell me about yourself or what are your key strengths. A lot of employers now use a line of interviewing called behavioral interviewing, where they're expecting you to use an example to kind of gauge your skill sets.
Yeah. All of these things are so important, and you need to be prepared for this. You don't just walk in and cold call an interview. Now, what specific tips? So number 10, interview tips. What specific tips do you have for somebody that they're going out now? Now they've finally got that interview. Now, what are those tips they need to pay attention to?
Well, everybody's going to be nervous for their interview, so that's to be expected. You want to try and funnel that energy into positive demeanor and enthusiasm for the role. But some of the basics are often overlooked. People get so nervous and so serious about interviews, afraid about losing the job potentially, they forget to do some basic stuff like smiling. So you want to smile. People who've been incarcerated for a long time, that is a challenge. You don't always walk around while you're incarcerated with a smile on your face. Employers are expecting that, and they want to gauge not only that you're the right person in terms of skills, but are you the right person in terms of fit? Am I going to get along with everybody? Am I going to get along with you? So if you're smiling and I have to work with you for 40 hours a week, that's a big difference to me. In addition to that, great eye contact, be appropriate, an upbeat demeanor, and then also dress. You should always dress at least a step above the job that you want to take. A lot of folks just go in thinking, well, I've got all these great skills, they're going to hire me anyway. But in a higher employment market where there's more competition, and again, I think a person wants competition. I think those companies are the best, so never feel uncomfortable if you're one of 3 or one of 5 or even one of 10 being interviewed. But you have to look like you really want the part. So that foundation opens doors, that first impression. I've often, when I've interviewed people, thought, just from the first impression alone, I think they might work out. And I don't even know them other than what they've presented, but compared to based on what they've already communicated to me in different ways or form, whether it's my body language, a smile, their dress, it automatically gets me thinking about them fitting the role effectively. When it comes to answering questions, they're going to expect you to take 2 to 3 minutes per question. And a lot of people really struggle with the length of time they should answer a question. And I've worked with a lot of people, and they ask them how their interview went, and they said, well, it was really fast. And my first thought is, oh no, that means that you took very little time to answer their questions. So I would recommend that when people practice their interview questions and focus primarily on tell me about yourself and what are your key strengths, but make sure that takes 2 to 3 minutes. It's pretty hard to get there without using examples. So an example brings a skill set to life. So let's say you put down that you've got great organizational skills on your resume, and maybe that's one of your key strengths. You should use an example of how that's what you've done successfully in the past that lends itself to demonstrate your organizational skills. So whenever you put something down on a resume, you should be able to back it up with an effective response, an effective example. I referenced earlier a lot of employers are using a line of interviewing called behavioral interviews. So if you're going to interview for a major corporation, you can expect them to ask you a question, give me an example of a time that you did this. So for example, in customer service, they'll ask, give me an example of a time that you had to deal with an upset or angry client. And so by using the example, they can kind of visualize and see and gauge how well you can perform that skill or that activity. And they can kind of feel if that's the right thing for you to do. Another thing in an interview is a lot of people are uncomfortable talking about their past successes or accomplishments and awards. And the reality is those are very critical. I mentioned earlier that people that are going to interview for the job are all going to have the same skill sets and the same work experience. And so you want to be able to differentiate yourself by employers are looking to hire the person who performed the role most successfully. So I do want to hear about whether it's formal recognition or informal recognition. All that helps me make a good decision. And then as you're finishing up, the employer is going to expect you to ask a few questions. So you should always ask, tell me about your benefits. Every employer has different benefits. You need to know this is your one chance to get that info. And then you also want to ask about growth opportunities. You want to be at an organization for a long time, not job hopping. And then last, make sure you get the hiring manager's business card. I would certainly recommend sending them a thank you email, or if you ever need it for follow-up. But those would be some of the key things that I would emphasize within the scope of an interview. And so it does take practice, and practice will help you make perfect.
Wow. Well, I'll tell you what, you have given us so much wonderful advice today. We appreciate it so much. We thank Ramon Torres with Goodwill Industries for being with us today. Wings on the Air is sponsored by Rainstar Capital Group, managed by Regional Director Bob Moore. You could call Bob directly at 505-331-4246. You could go to our website, wingsforlifeinternational.org, and give us a call if you need to reach us at 505-291-6412. 505-291-6412.
Wings on the Air is sponsored by Rainstar Capital Group.